podcast, a show about baseball, dreams, and family. I'm John Gonzalez, the dad, and if you're new to this show, it's a dad and his three sons talking about the game they love. Today we have two of the three sons on the podcast. Let's introduce our guests today because we're talking about the Caribbean World Series, which kicked off last night, January 31st, and will continue the rest of this weekend and into next. Joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina, it's Zach Gonzalez. He's our resident Mariners fan. Zach, how you doing over there?
I'm doing great. It's February now, and baseball is back. So I'm excited.
I love it. I thought of you last night. I was at a Griffins game, a hockey game, believe it or not, in Grand Rapids last night, and there was that one fan from Grand Rapids that wears his Mariners shirt everywhere. So he was there.
Was it the Teal Julio one?
No, this was just a straight up Mariners, whatever it was, rain. What's it called?
Rain.
Isn't there rain? Like, I don't know. From last year's playoff. I don't know. It was a playoff shirt, or 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that was that. Joining us from Grand Rapids. Speaking of Grand Rapids, it's son number two. It's Ty Gonzalez. He's our Mets fan. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, excited that we can do a live stream this morning, get our coffees going and talk some baseball. Now that our Lions are out, I don't really care about football, so it's full on baseball mode.
No, we don't even want to talk about the Lions. Oh my gosh, that's a whole different podcast and a whole different story. But last week I got to talk about Lions, and Zach and I were on a sports show. We did a fill-in spot and talked about Big League Dreaming, and we talked a lot about the Lions on last weekend's show when I filled in for the Sports Project show. But we're live today, and if you're joining us or just tuning in, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Like I said, the podcast is the dad and his three sons talking about baseball, and the topic, as we said earlier, is the Caribbean World Series, which kicked off last night. Two games were on the docket. Zach, why don't you run down for everyone listening or watching the schedule for this interesting? It's been going on for what, 47 years or whatever. It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, so the format is a round robin format. There's 5 teams. So each team will play each other once. So they got 4 games. And then the 4 best teams essentially get seeded. First, the number 1 seed will play the 4 seed. The 2 seed will play the 3 seed in a semifinal matchup. And then the 2 winners will play in the final. So the 5 countries are the Dominican, Venezuela, Puerto Rico. For the first time, Japan is in the Caribbean series, so that's pretty fun. And then the host country, Mexico. And all these games are played in Mexicali, Mexico, which is like right on the border. It's about 2 hours east of San Diego. So all of these games are in Pacific time. So 3 hours behind us here in Eastern time. So you'll see some of the games be a little bit later, 10 p.m. Last night, the Mexico game when they beat Puerto Rico 8-1. That was a 11 p.m. start. But there is about 2 games per day. So you have your day game and then your night game.
That's a cool format. I mean, 5 teams doesn't seem like a lot of teams. I know in the years past they've had more than 5 teams, right? 8 or 9 teams.
Yeah, I think so. It depends on like what kind of event it is, if it's considered Caribbean series or not. Because there's other types of international play as well. But what this series is, it's like each country has their own little winter league. Like you'll hear professional guys say, "Oh, I'm going down to Mexico to play winter ball," and they'll have their own little league. So the teams that are playing in this league, essentially, they won their winter league in their country, and then that team is moving on to play in the Caribbean series. So it's not like these rosters aren't stacked with all stars like we saw in the World Baseball Classic, where you just get one Dominican team and it's just all stars top to bottom. This series, it's like you have like 1 or 2 known MLB guys, and then everybody else is just guys that were on that team in the winter league. So it's pretty fun.
We'll talk more about the players in a few minutes, but let's go to Ty right now because I know Ty, you are squeezing in this podcast in between a lot of things you have going on. But it is fun to talk baseball in February. I can't believe it's February 1st today. Pitchers and catchers report, at least for the Tigers, on February 12th. So it's this little gap here before, the pitchers and catchers report, full squads. Then we have minor league action in Arizona and in Florida. This kind of just gets us excited. I mean, I know yesterday in Grand Rapids when I was here, we had a nice warm day. Sun was out, right? So we're kind of itching for baseball right now.
Yeah, definitely, and it's perfect timing too. Like you said, right before spring training starting, kind of right before this off week of the Super Bowl. Like there's always that off week. Perfect time to get some baseball in. And I think it's really cool that Zach mentioned. There's not going to be a ton of all-star big names that you're going to see, so it's going to be a good time to check out some new guys that you might not have heard of before, and kind of see some young talent that you might not usually see or typically see in some of the spring training games as well.
But you're going to know some names. So let's go to Zach here. And I think the most interesting thing about the names, it comes from managers, right?
Yeah, each team has a former major leaguer as their manager. So the two teams that we all were like, all right, I'll take this team, I'll take this team to talk about. So my two countries were Venezuela and Puerto Rico. So the team that won the Winter League down in Venezuela is the Cardenales de Lara, and their manager is Henry Blanco, longtime catcher. Ty, I know you remember him. Venezuela's never won a Caribbean Series title before. A couple players on their team that are major league guys or former major league guys: Ildemaro Vargas, Edwin Escobar, and Hernan Perez. Dad, I know you remember Hernan Perez. And then Puerto Rico, it was Team Mayaguez, and their manager's Will Cordero. A couple players on their team: Eddie Rosario, Henry Ramos, Shed Long Jr., who's a former Mariner. I saw him hit an absolute bomb at Camden Yards for the Mariners a few years back. I thought it hit the Utah Street. They claim it didn't, but it bounced and then it went into the restaurant. Ty, remember when we did our trip when there was like that restaurant?
Oh yeah,
it like went behind the bar in the restaurant.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And Puerto Rico has a pitcher, Derek Rodriguez. He's the son of Ivan Pud Rodriguez.
Wow.
That's when you know you're getting old.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This podcast, you're getting old when you're the dad and his sons.
Yeah, these guys are getting drafted. Like, guys are signing in the Dominican international signing, and it's like these people's son, Pedro Strope's son, Ty. Remember him for the Cubs, Pedro Strope?
Oh
His
yeah.
son signed a professional contract on January 15th.
Wow. Crazy.
Well, I did a little research on the two teams that I was checking on, Mexico and Japan. Oh, I'm sorry, Zach, you didn't get did you get to both your teams?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so.
Covered.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned earlier this format and the way this tournament is done. It's their reward, right, for winning their respective leagues, which I think is really cool too. So, in Mexico, Benji Gill is the team manager, and they were able to defeat the Tomateros de Culiacan in 4 games in the Mexican Pacific League. They won the title there. Benji, obviously former major leaguer, has helped the team win titles 2015 to 2021, and he also was part of the 2023 World Baseball Classic. So his team is Charros de Jalisco. Yeah, I'm repping the hat here. I got this from my folks who went down there a couple years ago to visit, and they brought me back a Charros hat. So I have that, and they also brought me back, a necklace from Mexico. So I'm wearing that as well. So. Yeah, Team Mexico will be fun to watch this year. They have an interesting roster. Speaking of Benji Gill and sons, his son Mateo Gill is on the roster, so that's really interesting. Let's see here. Well, what else was I saying? Oh, about Team Mexico, notable players: Billy Hamilton, You know, he's a star. He's a leadoff hitter, playing center field. He'll steal a few bases. He's been around. Manny Buñuelos, Stefan Nagasak. I don't remember him at all. But Jack Mayfield also played in the major leagues. So not a stacked team, but a decent team, and they're known to have a little power. So we'll see what happens. They scored some runs last night, I believe. So yeah, it should be fun to watch. I think the more interesting team is this team from Japan. Zach, did you notice that these guys are really? There's just no big superstars for Japan.
It's so hard to like learn about those guys because they have to play in Japan for so many years before they can even come to the US. So those guys could be like young, really good players, but unless, you're watching the KBO and those kinds of games and following it early on, it's hard to learn those guys.
Yeah, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about most of these guys, played like in their version of the minor leagues in the Nippon Professional Baseball League. So there are also independent minor leagues available too, and they have industrial leagues in Japan. They are managed by Alex Ramirez, and I was trying to think of Alex Ramirez. That name sounds familiar, and here's why: is because he's a legend. He's part of the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame. He played for three teams throughout his career, 2001 to 2013. He hit 380 home runs, and the team he is coaching is the Japan Breeze. And so this is not a lot of people know much about this team. We'll see them today, right? In this format, they did not play yesterday. They play today, right, Zach?
Right. Yep. I think they have the midday game today, noon 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I believe it's against Dominican too, right?
In the Dominican, I know you were looking at that team.
Yeah.
But that's interesting Albert Pujols, I think, is the big name, right, during this tournament.
Right. Yeah, he's the big name. He's the manager of the Dominican. Yeah, Zach sent me the rosters, and I was looking at it, and I had to double take it a few times. I'm like, Albert Pujols, manager, what? And then I was looking at all the names. I'm like, man, I don't really recognize any of these guys, except for Johnny Cueto. Johnny
That's right.
Cueto's pitching for Dominican, so that'll be fun to watch him. He's always fun to watch.
I think he's
just to run-
starting today. I think Cueto is starting today against Japan.
Yeah. Yep.
But Robinson Cano, you obviously know him, Ty on Dominican. And
Oh,
they
yeah.
they have a former Mariners closer, Alex Colome, on their team too. And Junior Caminero, who's like a huge prospect, and he's with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's the one that hit that home run in the championship game to beat Licey. That 454-foot bomb to dead center. Ty, did you see that clip where he took his bat, he like threw it way up?
Oh,
in the air,
yeah.
like crazy. It took him like a minute and a half just around the bases.
Yeah, basically walked around the bases.
Yeah, in like the top of the ninth, like not even a walk off.
Yeah.
Well, we will see Japan take on the Dominican. That game's at 3:50 today on the MLB Network, and then later tonight we'll see Venezuela. They'll be the home team taking on Mexico, 8:50 on also the Major League Baseball Network. And the games are being played, I think we mentioned it, at the Estadio Nido de los Águilas. That's the Eagle's Nest for everyone that wants to know what that means in Mexicali. So looking forward to those games. I know that, did you guys get to watch any of the games yesterday?
I
didn't get to watch him.
I turned on the Mexico game for a little bit late last night, and all these games are broadcast in English. It's on MLB Network, MLB.TV, and then MLB Network Direct. And the crew, I was like, oh, I know that voice. The commentator crew, Rod Allen, Dad. And Rod Allen's calling all these games for the Caribbean Series. I was like, oh man, this is like a throwback to the Detroit Tigers days.
I remember when I was doing some research, I saw his name come up. I forgot about that he was going to be commentating these.
I recorded the games yesterday because I knew I wasn't going to have a chance to really watch them. So I recorded the games. And this morning, as you guys know, I get up early. I got up and watched like the first inning of the Mexico game. And it was just so cool to hear his voice again. It brought back a lot of memories, hearing Rod Allen calling the game. And you have to remember, he had a big bulk of his career in Japan, right? So he knows the international game really well. He's a good choice to do these play-by-plays, or be the analyst, I should say, because he has, once you've lived over there and played over there, it's a whole different vibe altogether. So it's good to have him back on the airwaves. And I think he doesn't do a lot of the Marlins game, or isn't he in Miami doing some TV stuff, Zach?
Yeah, he's part of the broadcast crew for the Marlins, and I think there's a couple other Marlins people that are doing all these um, Caribbean Series games. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I read it like he's gonna be on the crew or whatever, and then when I heard his voice, I was like, oh snap, it's like a throwback.
Yeah, I'm waiting for him to, break out some of his Tiger stuff.
Yeah. Oh, former Tiger.
You just never know. I ran down today's games. Zach, can you run down the rest of the schedule? Do you have it in front of you? I might have it somewhere here.
Yeah. So today, February 1st, Japan plays Dominican, Mexico plays Venezuela. Tomorrow, the 2nd, Japan plays Puerto Rico, and Dominican plays Mexico. And then on Monday, the 3rd, is Venezuela versus Puerto Rico, Mexico versus Japan. And then on Tuesday, the 4th, is the last day of the pool play, essentially. Puerto Rico versus Dominican, Japan versus Venezuela. And then on the 5th, so that'll be next Wednesday, is the semifinal. And then Thursday, the 6th, is kind of like a day off. That's the third place game. The two losers from the semifinal will play. And then the final will be on Friday, the 7th.
So it wraps up rather quickly. I would imagine that Dominican and Mexico would probably be two of the top favorites. What do you guys think, Zach?
I think so, especially since today Mexico will play Venezuela. Venezuela coming off that loss. So if they can get up 2-0, then they should be in good shape, get some momentum going.
Ty, what do you think?
Yeah, I would think Mexico, Dominican, but never count out Japan. You never know. Like Zach said, we don't know a lot about these guys, and they have their own style of play, so you never know.
Yeah, they'll be competitive for sure. They'll be good fundamentally. And I think they have some. If I remember the roster a little bit, doing some research on it, it seems to me they have some good left-handed hitters. It seems like they can hit really well, and but they'll be solid all around. They'll give teams games for sure, whether they have the experience at the international level, to compete against some of these teams. I don't know, but it's interesting to have Japan right in this uh, Caribbean World Series. Next year, I did see that South Korea will be in the tournament as well. So they'll add them, and I think those games are going to be in Venezuela maybe next year. Not sure where they're going. They're going somewhere else, but they're going to add them to this whole thing. But it's a good. We said it earlier in the podcast. Again, you listen to Big League Dreaming, the podcast, a show about baseball, dreams, and family. And it's good to have this little break before we get to spring baseball, which I know we're all itching for. All three of us, right? And I know Zane as well, who couldn't join us in the podcast. By the way, Zane is in South Bend, Indiana, and he's a big Red Sox fan. And I know that we talked not too long ago about the MLB Pipeline Top 100, but I keep looking at that list, Zach. I keep going back to it, going like, I do need to do some research on these guys because some of them I don't know.
Yeah, pretty soon here they'll be releasing the top 30s for every organization. Because every team only has a few guys in that top 100. So you know where your top 2, 3 guys are, but after that, you want to see where Pipeline's putting the rest of your organization, who are newcomers to your team's top 30, who fell off, things like that. But yeah, it's really cool that we get to watch some baseball the first week of February. The next weekend is when Division II college baseball will get going, and then the weekend of February 14th will be opening day for Division I college baseball on Friday the 14th. So this is kind of like a week early taste of watching some baseball on TV before we're starting to see some college baseball games on ESPN.
Well, we might be seeing Zane's team play because I know they head down to Texas, I believe, next week. That's probably why he's not on today because he's busy with practice and so forth. And I think they play on the 7th of February in San Antonio. So sometimes those games are, they're not high productions, like MLB or ESPN, but you get to watch get a little camera angle from behind the backstop or something like that, and you hear some random kid walking in there going, "Hey, he's got where are my seeds at?"
It's like when you go to the slow pitch softball tournament and the guy puts his cell phone up behind home plate so he can Facebook live stream his slow pitch game.
I had a friend that was pitching in one of those leagues, and he's like, "Hey, Gonzo, do you want to see my outing?" I'm like, "What?" I go, "Was there a camera crew?" "No, I just set up my cell phone and watch so I could watch me pitching." "Watch this! I strike out this guy on a curveball, and it's just floating in there." Like, yeah, no one could hit that.
Reminds me of my wiffle ball days. My prospect tapes are still available if anyone wants to see them on YouTube.
On YouTube, I love it. I love it. Well, no, this is going to be a lot of fun watching these games. Are you guys going to be able to catch some today or this weekend at all?
I might have to check some on demand because I know we mentioned all of them are on MLB Network, and I don't have MLB Network, but I was scrolling on the ESPN app, and I think they're putting them on demand on the ESPN Plus app. I'm not sure. I haven't watched one yet, but I think they will be available on demand somewhere.
That's great. Yeah, we'll definitely try to find them and send out whatever links you can find, guys, on our social media. Speaking of social media, Ty, where are we on social media?
Yeah, we're on TikTok at Big League Dreaming. We're also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at BLD Pod. That's at BLD POD. Of course, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and here on YouTube as we're running this live today. Thank you if you joined the podcast. It's every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you all next week.
Okay, well, thanks for giving us the rundown. Have a great weekend, everyone. Zach sporting the 616 there. That's the Whitecaps baseball hat, right?
Yep, the Copa de Diversión
That's right.
series through minor league baseball. So yeah,
And I got the Jados hat, and Ty, of course, repping his Mets, so we're good.
I'm just waiting to see if Torkelson's going to come on over.
If he does, he's going to hit 45 home runs.
That's what I said. I did say that. Yeah,
You did.
when me and Katie were falling asleep the other night, we were both almost asleep. I said, "Oh, by the way, Torkelson's coming to the Mets." She jumped out of the bed. "What? You're kidding me?" I said, "I swear he might be coming to the Mets." Oh no!
He'll
So we'll
start out
see.
he'll start out hitting bombs left and right, and everyone will love him.
Yep.
Then he'll go for like a 0 for 25 streak or something and strike out 22 times, and people in New York they won't put up with it.
They'll last one game. He'll strike out three. He'll strike out three times, and his fourth at bat, they'll be booing. Boo. That's what they did to Lindor. They did it to Lindor.
And then they chant MVP, right? So there you go. That's
Yep.
that's New York for you. All right, take care, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.
all right,
See
see
ya.
ya.
All right, I think we're